What's going on, you guys? Zach here. Hope you're having an awesome day or night or whenever you're watching this. Hope you're having an awesome time. Today, I want to talk about the best lenses for your gimbal videography. Now, gimbal cinematography is becoming such a thing. A lot of people are doing it. What is the best gear for that? So I want to talk a little bit about camera choices, and then we'll get into the lenses and all that stuff, because I think focal distance is actually pretty crucial. You don't have to shoot it all on one fixed lens. There's a lot of different things that you can use for this. Now, the lenses that I'm going to talk about are my personal preferences. What you utilize for your gimbal work might be different from my own, but when it comes to run and gun and cinematic stuff, these are my primary top lens choices. Okay, now what you're going to learn from what I'm bringing up about my lens choices is that it is a pretty wide range of lenses that I like to utilize for gimbal cinematography. A gimbal is just as versatile tool, if not more versatile than, let's say, a tripod. So your lens choices are going to be pretty diverse. These are my favorite lenses that I like to utilize, and it's just all coming from personal preference on what type of stuff you can shoot, how you can maximize the content that you're capturing off utilizing one tool in a couple different lenses. That leads me into my first one, which is the 18-105 lens. Now, what I love about this lens choice, especially when it comes to the Canon and the Sony, is the fact that it has internal image stabilization. So first of all, right out of the bat, when I'm shooting on a gimbal, it's already going to add an additional stabilization, which when you're shooting on gimbals, they can be smooth, but additional smoothness is always helpful, especially if you're ever shooting like any super run and gun fast stuff, or you're trying to get like ultra smooth. It's going to keep the image a lot more stable optically in ways that you couldn't do manually. But that's not why I love using this lens. The image stabilization is great, but if you don't have a lens that has image stabilization, that's totally fine. That's why you're using a gimbal. The reason why I love it so much is, especially with the Sony 18-105, is that I can zoom in and zoom out. It doesn't change the balance, doesn't counteract any of the balancing that I've already done, but it can change the focal length really quickly. So when I'm on like a run and gun shoot, and this is like my primary lens, if I want to get like a wide, I can capture that at the 18, so fully zoomed out. I can get my establishing shots, but then it's like run and gun. I don't have time to swap lenses. I'll swap it and I'll zoom it right into, let's say, a 70 or even a 105 and capture like detail shots or more sort of observant of like people interacting. So it's a very versatile lens for using on a gimbal, and I love doing long lens cinematography on a gimbal. You can get some really dynamic cinematography from zooming right in on your gimbal and then just kind of doing like slow moves. You don't have to do any crazy drastic movement, because that'll actually all happen within frame. Since you're punched in, there's so much happening within the frame, you only have to do like little drifts and you're able to get some really dynamic shots. My next lens is used for getting like establishing shots. I like using like an 11-16 to capture kind of like my wide establishing shots. Now these are really great if you're at an event and you want to capture the grand scale of something. You can really pop on that wide angle lens and just swoop in and capture your wide coverage. Now, wide angle on a gimbal, there's a lot of really great stuff you can get. And even if you're shooting like maybe something a little bit more intense, you can get right up into the person's face and track behind them with the wide angle lens. When I have the wide angle on my gimbal, I like to utilize my gimbal almost like it's a slider. So I would just kind of do like these nice brush by shots to kind of show the grand reveal of everything. Wide angle is really good at establishing, and a wide angle on a gimbal, you can really add a nice movement to show the vastness of something. Lens number 3 would be like a 50 mil. Now 50 mil on a gimbal is like a little nuts, a little crazy, and I would only do it for more cinematic or experiential, sort of anything that you can block beforehand so that your talent and your DOP or yourself, whoever's shooting, know how to frame it. A lot of the cinema lenses that we use for our filmmaking actually don't have autofocus, and if you don't have a focus puller, you're gonna have to play this whole trick of keeping your talent at the same distance away from your camera so your focus isn't changing. Now this is something I'd highly recommend learning and teaching your talent. So let's say if you're shooting with a gimbal, instead of you trying to like constantly keep your distance and keeping your character in frame and, you know, falling over a ledge or something, I'd recommend teaching your talent find the distance that you have between you and your actor and say, keep this distance in mind for whenever we're traveling or transporting. Now, you can make the fine-tune adjustments, but let them know that that distance is keeping them in focus. And if they come a little bit too far forward, they're out of focus, and they come too far back, they're out of focus, etc., etc. Now, having a nice shallow depth of field when filming on a gimbal just looks super cinematic, and I love doing it quite a bit. So it's a fun thing to do if you have a little bit more time, and the footage that you get out of it is just... Now, those are my 3 primary lenses that I like to play around with. Each one gives a different focal length. So to go over it again, if you're doing any sort of event coverage, run and gun stuff, 18-105 is amazing. If you're shooting on Sony, the Sony G series, super amazing. I love it. I have a link to it in the description below if you're interested in purchasing one. The second lens would be like an 11-16 mil. So if you want to capture that nice grand establishing shots. And then the third lens would be your 50 mil, or even like playing around with like an 85 mil. One thing to keep in mind is the tighter you are on your shot, the less stability you have. Let's say you're shooting on an 85 mil that doesn't have internal stabilization, there's gonna be a lot more movement in that as opposed to like an 11 or 16 mil. So keep your distance in mind when it comes to stability. I would recommend if you're shooting in like a rocky area or there's like lots of movement and you have to move the camera around, make it a little bit wider. As soon as it's super tight, you're losing the whole gimbal stability and it's just starting to become like a weird robotic bobbing. It doesn't feel natural. At least that's in my personal perspective. And that is it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any preferences of lenses that you like to use for your gimbal cinematography, love to read that in the description below. Give us a subscribe, like, share to all of your filmmaking buddies, and if you guys want to follow my life just a little bit more, you can follow me on the Instagrams at Zach Ramelin. If you have any questions regarding this video or ideas for future tutorials, write that to me, personal message me, DM me, I think that's what it's called. I'm not big on the whole Instagram thing. Anyways, I'll see you guys later. Keep it fresh and keep making some great stuff.